out there all around the world and all those ships at sea, and welcome to another episode of Inkquiring Minds, Pen Resurrection Sunday. My name is Doug and I'm back with another vintage fountain pen. I've been doing a lot of restorations of Parker Vacumatics, mostly because I love restoring them, and they're very popular. Usually I restore one of these gorgeous 1940s stacked celluloid Parker Vacumatics, and within minutes of me posting the video for members only, they get snapped up. Usually. Several weeks ago I did restore this 1942 Parker Vacumatic, which is very unique because it has a golden pearl barrel, a silver pearl blind cap and cap, silver trim, and a beautiful 14 karat gold nib. It works perfectly. It's just an amalgamation of two different pens. And you can see the resurrection of this pen by clicking right up there. If you're interested in purchasing this pen, it is still for sale. So contact me at inkquiringminds@gmail.com and let me know if you're interested. People are more interested in these azure blue Parker Vacumatics, this one from 1946. And this is going to be the subject of our restoration, reclamation, resurrection today. This is what's called a Parker Vacumatic Junior. It has the two cap bands and no blue diamond on the clip. As I understand it, there are various levels of cap bands, 2 and 3 and wide. This one has the wide band with the chevrons on it and the blue diamond on the clip. This is from 1945, so this would be called a senior. And this is my prized possession, which had a broken nib and a ground up section, and I restored it by custom grinding it into a stub and custom shaping the section. That's why it's so special to me. It writes like a champ. And when this pen is all cleaned up, it will look as beautiful as this one. There are some challenges with this pen, however. On the outside, we see that it is in perfect shape. It is dull from more than 75 years of use. But the first challenge we see on the outside of the pen is this blind cap right here. It is in rough shape. Someone was a real biter.
He's a biter.
People love to bite their pens for some reason. I don't know. They should stay away from vintage fountain pens if they do. If you're a biter and you want to buy this pen once it's fixed, I won't sell it to you. Just that plain and simple. But look at this gouge right here. This one is really deep. So I'm going to try to sand out those gouges without drastically changing the shape of that blind cap. So that's going to be challenge number 1. When you open up the pen, challenge number 2 is going to be this nib. This nib is seriously twisted, seriously bent, and seriously gnarly. I've got some close-up pictures that I did of this nib with my USB microscope, and you can see how awful it is. I'm going to put it here on this side of the screen to show you what it looks like before I try to fix it. Then I'll put the restored nib on the other side of the screen. Hopefully, I don't know in advance, it's going to be a challenge. These nibs get very, very brittle over the years, where the tipping meets the gold, and sometimes they snap off. That happened with my 1945. I was just devastated when it snapped off right in the middle of restoration. I was filming at the time too. It just popped right off. But I was able to grind it down into my first gold stub nib, and it writes beautifully, as I keep saying. But I just love this pen. This is never going to be for sale. Hopefully we won't come to that. I'll be able to straighten that nib and be able to get this pen to write again. The other challenge, I don't know whether it's going to be a major challenge or not, but let's take a look at the insides of it. It's nicely transparent, and it looks like there's a working diaphragm in there. So I'm going to try to get the section off first. Hopefully we won't have to use any heat. I'll just give it a try. No, oh, look at that. It's coming right off. I haven't tried this section yet. I leave these things until I'm on camera, and it opened up perfectly. So now I'm going to take my inspection camera, which I got from Scott Pauley of the Inky Nib, and we'll turn that on, and we'll go down the barrel and take a look and see what the camera tells us. Now let's see if we can take this breather tube out. It came out really nicely. It's got a little bit of ink in there. It's that amber color that I expect. It's the same celluloid as what you find, that amberish celluloid in the pump rod. So now I'm going to just put all these parts in my ultrasonic bath of pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, for just a couple of minutes. I've been getting some emails recently where people are telling me that ammonia is bad for gold and ammonia is bad for celluloid and all those kinds of things. Pen flush is made of ammonia and distilled water, and maybe a drop of a surfactant type dish soap like Dawn. People have told me that Dawn's not very good for your pens either. But in these minuscule amounts, mostly distilled water, just for a couple of minutes. Never leave gold parts, celluloid parts sitting in pen flush overnight. I just turn on the ultrasonic, couple of minutes in the pen flush bath to loosen up any old ink, that kind of thing, and then I rinse it out with clear distilled water. So don't get me wrong, these never get exposed to those chemicals for any length of time. It's just to loosen up some old ink and get things flowing again so that I can polish them up. So let's drop these in the bath just for a couple of minutes, and we'll be right back and see whether we can knock out that section. Okay, I've soaked the section. A little bit of ink came out. Let's see if we can tap this feed out of the section with our block. Go, tapped the feed right out and left the nib there. There, we can pull that out. Now let's see. That date code was visible because the nib was sitting slightly proud of the section. It's a 6 with a dot, which matches up with the barrel, which had a 6 and a dot on it. And of course now, before I even start polishing it up, I'm going to start working on that really bent nib. As you saw with the inspection camera, that diaphragm in the barrel looks new and pliable, and so I think it's going to work. And it tells me that this pen was restored at some point. The diaphragm was replaced, and maybe the pen went up for sale after it got dropped and people couldn't write with it anymore. So let's see whether it has some life back in it. I'm going to try to adjust it back into shape again and take photos of it during my progress to see if any progress is made at all, and we'll see how it comes out. Once I can get that nib back in shape again, then I'll worry about polishing it up. The feed is in really good shape. I will polish up the bottom of that ebonite feed right there so it's nice and shiny. The section has no nicks or dings in it, so that can just take some regular rubbing compound polish, but I'm going to work on that nib first. It's job number 1. So I've retrieved everything from the pen flush bath after a couple of minutes. Lots of ink came out of that cap. We'll look at that soon. Of course, the barrel has a working diaphragm in it, but I want to put the feed and nib and section back together again so I can test this nib, because I worked on it. I used my flat, narrow nib pliers that I got from Pen Tooling and straightened that bent tine out, and now it's looking fairly good. I sort of dipped it in some ink and ran it on some paper, and it feels very scratchy, so it still has some issues. Maybe when it was dropped and bent, it took a bit of damage to that tip. We'll see, but I want to see how it writes. So I'm going to put it back in the section to test it, because I think I've got it aligned properly now. We'll see how it aligns when it's put together with the feed and the section, which sometimes distorts it out of position. So we're going to put the nib and the feed together like that. A little bit of gripping material. And I always do this before I put the section back in the barrel. Put the section back in the barrel just to give it a little bit more leverage there, so I can push a little bit better. And I just twist it around a little bit until I feel that sweet spot where that feed has been sitting for 75 plus years, and give it a push. And it seems to be pretty good. It's a lot further up than I want it, but that will be good for dip testing and adjusting that nib. And you can put the breather tube back in like that. And we can also test the ink capacity of this diaphragm and see whether the diaphragm actually works. So as always, I'm going to get out our scale and measure the weight of the pen with the blind cap, but empty. Press tear, get out our Watermans, and I hear bubbles. Give her 5 or 6 good pumps, or until I don't hear bubbles anymore. This is fairly transparent barrel, so I can look at it in the light and see that it's pretty full. Let's put it on the scale right away, and we got 0.88. Not good. It should be 0.13, something like that. I'm going to keep trying it. 1.1. Still not great capacity, but I'm going to leave it at that. Get out some paper, and we'll test this. 1946. Parker Vacumatic Azure Blue Pearl. Well, lots of feedback. A little scratch in that direction. But look at this. That's way too wet. So those tines have been separated, and I can actually see there's a bit of a wow in there. So I'm going to, they're actually fairly well aligned, and this feels like a medium. The miraculous thing is that that nib is now working. It may be wet and scratchy, but it's at least working. So I'm going to work on a little bit more, try to get those tines together a little bit more so it's not quite as wet, and we'll use some micro mesh on it. I'll start with some 8000 grit and do some figure eights and circles, and then go up to the 12,000 grit and see whether we can smooth that nib out. As I say, you align your nib first, make sure it's in perfect alignment, then we'll see whether we can get it not to be quite so wet and get it to be a little bit smoother. Well, I've got the nib writing fairly nicely now. It's not quite as wet. It still is wetter than I like it, but it's writing fairly smoothly now. So I think I'm going to knock that nib and feed back out again. I'm going to polish up that nib, and then I'm going to adjust it a little bit while it's out of the feed, while it's out of the section. Basically take my fingers and cross the tines so that it narrows up that slit so that it's not quite so wide. And I can do that better when it's out of the section. So I'm going to knock that back out again, and we're going to start to do the polishing process. The first thing is to grind those teeth marks and gouges out of that blind cap and get it to maintain its shape. So I'm going to work on that a little bit. We'll get that nib and feed out of there and polish up the nib. I'll take some photos of it so we can see it all polished up, and then we'll go after that blind cap. And there we are with the nib all polished up. It's looking really, really nice. See the 6 dot on the bottom. R usually means a replacement nib or something like that. I'm not sure. And the bottom's all shined up as well. The nib's in good enough shape now to put it back in the section, right with the pen again. But the first thing I want to do is polish up that blind cap, and then polish up the barrel and the cap itself and all the hardware. And we'll see if we can get this clip off of this pen to be able to polish up that cap. Sometimes these jewels are really, really stubborn, so I have to polish the cap without the clip being removed. So the barrel itself doesn't have a lot of deep gouges or scratches like the blind cap does, but there's the imprint, Parker Vacumatic, made in the USA, 6 dot, which matches the nib imprint. So I'm going to leave the blind cap on the barrel when I go at it with some 400 grit sandpaper and see how much of that gouging I can get out of that blind cap. But we keep that on so that this seam ends up being the same size all the way around. If we remove this blind cap and polish it on its own, we'll get a gap between those two edges. We don't want that to happen. So going at it with some 400 grit will generally show up exactly where all those gouges are in sharp relief all the way around it, and a little bit on the very end here as well. There we go. So you can see in sharp relief where all those gouges are. So So I'm going to use a little bit more aggressive sandpaper against those spots, but I want to keep the same shape. So it means kind of reducing the whole thing by the depth of those gouges. Okay, I've gone at it with some pretty aggressive sandpaper, even on my grinding Dremel tool. And when I was grinding it with some pretty coarse grades, it was looking pretty scary. Lots of gouges and all that kind of stuff, but I was getting material away and trying to keep it even as I went. And then I went to a little bit less coarse material, another foam sanding pad, and then down to the 400 grit. And I think I've gotten out, there's a little gouge right there, a little scratch from my sandpaper that I've got to get out. But that large groove and all of those bite marks are gone, just some sanding marks I've got to remove now. Of course, I'm looking at this with my loupe to look microscopically at the surface, and I think, very carefully, I think I've got it all. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 400 grit flexible and go all over the barrel, because there's a few nicks here and there. I'm going to avoid the imprint, and then we'll go up through the micro mesh to polish this thing right up. Normally we get round scratch marks around this part of the barrel where the cap comes down over the years, and I seem to have gotten rid of all of those rings. The imprint's still in place, and I don't see any more scratches or gouges. Now we'll step up through the micro mesh from 1500 grit through to 12,000 and then finish up with some polishing compound. And here is the barrel all polished up, the blind cap. No gouges, no scratches, no bite marks. It's come out beautifully, and that imprint is still there somewhere. There it is, and the date code as well. I put the ebonite section on it to polish that up as well. Of course, there's polish and stuff inside those threads, but I'll clean that out with a soft toothbrush. And I've put some Pensbury Manor Penetrate Potion number 7 on this clip, and I'm letting it soak to try to get that jewel out, and then we'll polish up the cap to be the same. But quite the difference between old and dull and new and shiny. I was soaking the top jewel and the clip in some Pensbury Manor Penetrate Potion number 7 for a couple of hours, and I just gave it a try, gave it a turn with my gripping material, and it has come out, thank goodness. And there we go. And there's our clip. It's not looking too bad, but it's got lots of old tarnish and scratches and stuff on it. So we'll polish that up on my Dremel tool with some metal polish and some polishing compound, and then I'll go at it with my jeweler's cloth. I'll put a little metal polish on that as well, just to clean out any old corrosion on that piece of brass. This top piece of plastic actually unscrews from that brass, and I'm going to have to try to tease that out of there. And the reason I want to take that off is to get at that slot, so when I'm putting it back together again, I can use a slot screwdriver to tighten it down and then add the jewel to it. That's going to take a little bit of careful work to get that out of there. But now I can go ahead and polish up this cap. There aren't any major blemishes on this at all, just lots of old wear. So hopefully, I know it will come up to look as beautiful as that. But let's see what we can do with the clip first. All right, so now we have the cap and the barrel all polished up, just like brand new, sparkling. And we polished up the clip. Look at that. It looks just like it's brand new. I find this amazing all the time. These were so solidly built back in the 40s. This is not just gold plate. This is either very heavy gold plate over brass or it's gold filled. It's very resilient, and I polished the hell out of it to make it look like this. So we're going to put that clip back on again because I got the brass nut free from the jewel, and there's evidence of old glue on that jewel. The only way to get this off, I soaked it in my Pensbury Manor for quite a while and it didn't budge. So I figured it might be glued. So I added some heat with my heat gun and got it to budge. So I'm going to clean that thread off of any residual glue, and we will screw this clip back into the cap. Now I like to keep the clip between the two breather holes and not block the prettiest side. These turned stacked celluloid pieces have a bright side, a dark side, and a bright side. So the two opposite sides are bright and the two opposite sides are dark. And so you find the bright and the dark, and usually there's a dark between the two breather holes. In this case, it's right here. So I'm going to place that right there. We're going to put the brass nut back in and use a standard slot screwdriver to screw it in place. Got to make sure those threads engage squarely because it's brass on plastic and we don't want to strip them. So I'm going to place the clip where I want it and tighten it down. Hand tight so it doesn't budge. It's budging a little bit, so I'm going to go a little tighter. There, now it's not budging. So I'm going to clean out some of that old glue. I don't know whether it's contact cement or shellac. I think it's probably shellac. So I used a dental pick just to pick out some glue from those threads. And then we're going to get that jewel started in that. Make sure that it goes in correctly. Still some glue in those threads. We want those threads to move smoothly. Again, this is fairly soft plastic in brass, so it should move freely, and it's not. No, there's got to be some glue still in that brass nut. So I'm going to take that off again, and I have to get inside those threads to get the glue out. Yeah, lots of glue residue. Now I loosen it up. I'm going to put it in the ultrasonic bath for a while and free up some of that gunk. Well, this is a first for me. This whole sequence here, my microphone was off for some reason. I think maybe the battery ran out, but so I'm going to narrate this whole section. I cleaned out the brass and got the gunk off of the jewel, and now I'm going to reattach the clip, put it in position, grab the brass nut, use my slot screwdriver to screw it down tight. Needed to tighten it a little bit more, and there, that's tight. Now I'm going to put the threaded jewel back into the brass nut and tighten it down using some gripper material, inserting a pencil into the cap to press down on to get some more leverage. Use the gripper material to turn that little black plastic jewel into the cap. There, now it's tight. Now all I have to do is put the nib and feed back in the section. I've polished up the ebonite feed so it's nice and shiny, and then I'm sanding the end of the ebonite feed with some 400 grit flexible sandpaper. Get that ebonite powder on there and it becomes like a lubricant on the inside of the section. Makes it easier to slip into the section when I'm pressing the feed and the nib in. Grab the gripper material again, holding it top and bottom, finger and thumb, and I spin it around a little bit to find that sweet spot and then give it a really good push. We take it off the barrel and we can see how far it's pushed into that section. It's a little bit more than it was before, which is good. It was a little bit long in there. We'll put the breather tube in and then put it back in the barrel. Now I'm going to put a little lubricant on those threads. It's silicone oil. I've got a new vial for the silicone oil. Makes it easier to apply. It has a little blunt syringe on the end. This little plastic tube. And you can just apply the precise amount you want. Makes it a lot easier. And just run the threads back and forth a little bit to get it spread through, and that acts as an ink barrier. Polish off my fingerprints with my jeweler's cloth, check the tines to make sure they haven't been misaligned, and I find that they're just slightly misaligned. I don't know whether you can see this or not, but the nib slit was cut slightly off center and off angle. Makes it difficult to align and makes it difficult to polish as well, to get the right sweet spot on it. So I'm adjusting these tines a little bit just to get them to line up a little bit better. And there we go. Looks complete at this point. And we get out some paper, and I did a dip test here, 1946 Parker Vacumatic. I found it was very, very wet, but I was dipping it. So I decided, well, I'm going to fill it again. So I weighed the pen empty and then filled it up with some Watermans, and I'm getting 1.1 milliliters of ink. And the pen is still fairly wet, so I'm going to work on this nib off camera. So what are my thoughts about this pen resurrection? I think my microphone gave me more trouble than this pen did, and I expected the opposite. The big issues with this Parker Vacumatic were the incredibly gnawed and chewed blind cap.
We don't gnaw on our kitty.
Which was scarred beyond recognition and now is absolutely pristine and perfect. That was very satisfying to get that like that, because when I started getting into that material to shave it down, it was looking pretty awful. And, you know, your heart goes up into your throat when you start grinding away celluloid. But I don't think it looks bad at all. You wouldn't even notice that those scars were there. And the other main challenge with this pen was that nib. It was in such a terrible shape. That's why people, I think, had given up on it. I'm going to put this up here on one side so you can see its current condition, and on the other side of the screen we'll show some photos that I took of the nib before I started working on it. I was very pleased with how it came together fairly quickly using my pen tooling nib pliers, which are very, very useful. Even though I got the tines back together again, it wrote okay, but it was like a fire hose. Usually when a nib gets bent, it gets a little bit of a waffle on it, a little bit of a wave or something like that. This one had the wave, but it was in this direction. It was along the slit. So maybe I can draw that for you. So here's the tip of the nib, and what ended up happening was there was a bit of a wow going on like that. So this gap right there was allowing the ink to flow way too freely. The tines were together, but there was this gap right here, and that was a bend when this tine here was lifted up. So what I ended up doing, and this took me several hours over a couple of days, I would take my pen tooling nib pliers and apply them like this, just gripping and then squeezing gently, squeezing together. The tines were aligned perfectly, and I just kept squeezing. And what that did was reduce that gap. So now the nib is writing very nicely. It's still very wet, but it's not such a gusher anymore. And then the final challenge was the clip jewel did not want to come out of there. And the reason it didn't want to come out of there was because someone had glued it in with shellac. It was only the heat that I applied with my heat gun that released it. And then trying to get it back together again was difficult because there was remnants of that shellac. So it took me several hours of just very carefully teasing all of the shellac out of those soft plastic threads of that black clip jewel. But the clip itself came up beautifully, polished beautifully. Same thing with the cap rings. The whole pen is now flawless and writes beautifully. It takes about 1.1 milliliters of ink, slightly smaller capacity than I'm used to. I'm used to about 1.3 milliliters of ink. But that diaphragm that was in there, taking a look at it with my inspection camera, showed that it's in very good shape. It's very pliable, so it has been recently replaced. It might have been cut a little bit long, so it's taking up more of that capacity than normal. If you cut that diaphragm at the right length, it won't take up as much capacity in the barrel. And there you go, another pen resurrection success. This one was particularly satisfying. I said at the beginning that I would make this pen look just like my beloved 1945 Parker Vacumatic Azure Blue Pearl, and you can see that they are both gorgeous. And if I put them side by side, you can see the slight difference in the blind cap. You'd have to see them side by side to notice this one slightly tapers more than this one does. But on its own, you would never be able to tell. So there you go. I already have one of these beautiful pens, so I don't need another. So I am going to be selling this pen, and I'm going to sell it for $200 US plus shipping. If you're interested in purchasing it, then just drop me a line at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address, and I'll get you a shipping quote. Shipping to North America is about $10 these days. And I will also send you instructions on how to pay my PayPal. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel as well for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to new videos the moment I post them, like this one. And you'll get a leg up on the competition for purchasing this gorgeous pen. So don't be surprised if this pen is already sold by the time this video is public on Sunday. And there you have it. That just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching. And that's all she wrote.
I made this.